The story of the silent terracotta warriors is often told as a triumphant monument to absolute power and eternal imperial glory. But this colossal underground formation was never actually built to celebrate a great victory. It was constructed entirely out of a profound and suffocating fear of the unknown. Now, simply settle in, close your eyes, and let the heavy burdens of your day slowly fade away. Tonight we descend into a quiet shadow empire, a breathtaking labyrinth, built to guard against the approaching darkness. The relentless spring sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth of Lintong County in March of 1974. Local farmers were desperately digging a well to find water for their parched crops during a severe drought. They thrust their heavy iron shovels deep into the stubborn, unforgiving soil to pierce the dry surface crust. Instead of hitting the refreshing groundwater they desperately sought, metal unexpectedly scraped against something incredibly hard and unyielding. The dull, echoing clank reverberated strangely through the narrow earthen shaft, breaking the quiet murmur of the afternoon. They assumed it was just a buried rock or an old discarded pot abandoned by forgotten ancestors long ago. But what they had actually struck was the outer shell of a subterranean universe trapped in perpetual midnight. They carefully cleared away the loose dirt and thick intertwined roots of ancient trees with their calloused hands. As the suffocating layers of soil were meticulously peeled back, the rounded curve of a human head emerged. It was not the pale, horrifying bone of a shallow grave, but the rich reddish hue of baked terracotta. The sight was incredibly startling, as lifeless, hollow eyes stared blankly up toward a sky they had never seen. Dust clung to the sculpted contours of a stoic face that had silently waited in the damp darkness. More digging slowly revealed the broad shoulders of a heavily armoured warrior, standing frozen in a martial posture. The farmers had unwittingly opened a small, jagged portal into an expansive realm of absolute silence and eerie stillness. Stepping away from the glaring sunlight, archaeologists eventually descended into the damp, suffocating coolness of the newly opened pit. The air down there tasted thick with the metallic scent of damp clay and centuries of undisturbed isolation. Every careful scrape of their small metal trowels echoed loudly in the confined, cavernous space beneath the earth. Shadows danced wildly across the uneven earthen walls as flickering artificial lights illuminated the terrifying scale of the chamber. They brushed away the heavy soil from one silent soldier, only to find another standing shoulder to shoulder nearby. Then they uncovered 10, then 50, then hundreds of majestic clay figures standing in perfect, rigid military formation. This dark underworld held an atmosphere so heavy and majestic that breathing itself felt like a profound intrusion. The overwhelming scale of this buried legion slowly began to reveal itself as the painstaking excavation gradually expanded outward, 9 row, after meticulously organised row of silent sentinels stretched endlessly into the suffocating grey gloom of the vast corridors. They were uncovering a full imperial garrison, meticulously equipped with real bronze weapons that still gleamed with deadly sharpness. The fragile wooden roofs that once protected them had collapsed and burned in ancient fires many centuries before today. Yet, beneath the crushing weight of the collapsed earth, the warriors had stubbornly held their ground in eternal vigilance. It was a breathtaking and staggering archaeological discovery that completely defied all known historical expectations of the ancient world. Why would anyone bury such a magnificent and colossal army deep beneath the ground in complete and utter darkness? The initial assumption was that this must be a singular monument of glorious victory left by a triumphant ruler. But the real secret is far more unsettling than a simple display of immense imperial wealth and supreme dominance. This was not merely a random collection of decorative statues designed to impress the living citizens of the empire. It was a highly functional and meticulously prepared supernatural military installation designed for a completely different plane of human existence. The chilling temperature of the subterranean pit served as a constant reminder that this was essentially a massive graveyard. These unyielding soldiers were forged from the very earth they now occupied, bound to a silent duty without end. They stood as an impenetrable barrier between the world of the living and a terrifying, unseen realm of ghosts. The deeper the archaeologists dug into the unforgiving soil, the more they felt the overwhelming weight of ancient paranoia. Each uncovered warrior seemed to whisper fragmented tales of a monumental obsession with eternity and an inescapable, suffocating dread. The vibrant colours that once adorned their clay armour quickly flaked away upon touching the dry, modern surface air, This rapid decay added a deeply melancholic layer to the discovery, emphasizing the brutal and destructive power of passing time. Their rigid terracotta bodies remained intact, but their painted souls evaporated into the dim, shadowy atmosphere of the trench. And this initial descent into the earth was only the first fragile layer of a truly colossal and dark mystery. High above the sleepless streets of Manhattan, 52-year-old corporate executive Arthur sits alone in his glass penthouse at 2 in the morning. The soft amber glow from his silent television monitor casts long, solitary shadows across floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a darkened metropolitan skyline. Below his feet, millions of glittering city lights stretch endlessly into the midnight haze, echoing the silent geometry of an ancient subterranean imperial burial. He has spent 30 relentless years building a vast financial empire, sacrificing personal peace and quiet family moments for absolute authority and corporate status. Yet, staring at the grainy footage of earthen warriors unearthed in China, an unfamiliar hollow sensation suddenly expands within his heavily burdened chest. His name adorns prestigious foundations and marble building lobbies, yet none of these polished structures can shield him from the quiet approach of age. The grand palace halls of ancient Xianyang were forged from dark clay and heavy timber to manifest supreme authority over all known lands. Today, those ancient wooden beams have long since rotted into fine dust, while modern steel spires aggressively pierce the night clouds of North America. Here is where the past echoes into our present, revealing that human ambition has changed very little over the course of thousands of years. Both the mighty first emperor and the modern American titan share an obsessive, desperate longing to construct something that defies inescapable physical decay. We build taller glass monoliths and sign massive corporate deals, secretly believing our personal achievements might somehow grant us a form of immortality. But glass breaks and steel eventually rusts, leaving behind only the haunting memory of men who mistook their fleeting power for eternal permanence. In the quiet, air-conditioned isolation of his penthouse, Arthur pours another glass of whiskey while watching archaeologists carefully brush away ancient soil. He recognizes that same cold, relentless drive in the hardened terracotta eyes, staring back at him through the glowing digital television display. The urge to dominate global markets and leave an everlasting corporate legacy is merely a polished, modern continuation of the emperor's terrifying existential panic. What good is possessing absolute wealth and global influence if time ultimately erases every monument we painstakingly erect with our own hands? He wonders how many forgotten kings have stood in quiet rooms, contemplating the terrifying reality that their legacies would eventually turn to dust. But the real secret is that every towering skyscraper, much like every buried clay soldier, is born from a profound and paralyzing fear. As Arthur leans back against his leather armchair, the artificial silence of his luxury apartment becomes almost as suffocating as a sealed underground chamber. He realizes that the ancient ruler who conquered 6 rival kingdoms died alone, surrounded by the very dark shadows he spent his life fighting. The massive concrete towers outside his window offer no more protection against the passage of time than the dirt mound at Lintong County. True power can conquer armies and bend millions to one's will, yet it remains completely powerless against the steady, quiet ticking of the clock. The ambition to rule a continent or dominate a modern industry always demands the total surrender of present peace for an uncertain future. Outside, a passing fog rolls silently across the East River, wrapping the shimmering skyscrapers in a damp, grey shroud of quiet mystery. In this calm late hour, the distance between 21st century New York and ancient China dissolves into a single haunting contemplation of human fragility. The silence resting upon the sleeping city now mirrors the eternal undisturbed dark, where 8,000 silent clay sentinels continue their endless vigil. Beyond the narrow initial excavation pit lies a sprawling subterranean fortress spanning thousands of square meters beneath the ancient soil. Column after column of life-size terracotta infantry, cavalry, and charioteers stand frozen in an eternal, suffocating silence that chills the blood. Over 8,000 individual clay soldiers remain lined up in precise military battle formation, buried within 3 massive timber-roofed, vaulted chambers. The sheer physical scale of this silent legion creates an overwhelming sense of eerie majesty, completely unyielding to the slow passage of time. Standing shoulder to shoulder in the pitch-black earth, this frozen army was constructed to project supreme imperial power into the mysterious afterlife. Rows of terracotta officers silently command invisible regiments, forming a subterranean force that rivals history's greatest empires. Each corridor stretches into the suffocating gloom, presenting a terrifying vision of absolute discipline that has endured for more than 2 millennia. While their sculpted bodies are forged from cold river clay, the lethal weapons held tightly in their rigid hands were dangerously real. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of sharp bronze swords, lethal crossbow triggers, and pointed spears that had been preserved in the damp soil. These gleaming blades were coated with chromium oxide, keeping their cutting edges pristine throughout centuries of subterranean dark. Long bronze spears and curved halberds remain resting in rigid clay palms, ready to strike down any intruder who dares disturb their subterranean sleep. Yet these deadly functional weapons are wielded by soldiers whose hollow, blind terracotta eyes can never witness the blood of battle. The bizarre contrast between lethal, metallic hardware and inanimate clay faces creates a deeply unsettling, haunting atmosphere throughout the subterranean vaults. They hold their weapons in eternal readiness for a battle against invisible forces, waiting silently for commands that will never be spoken. Descending into these vaulted underground corridors feels like stepping directly into a colossal tomb designed to swallow all sound and light. The heavy subterranean air carries a thick, suffocating stillness, as if time itself has completely ceased to flow beneath the heavy earth. Not a single whisper breaks the eerie silence of the deep trenches where thousands of clay warriors maintain their timeless, rigid stance. The suffocating darkness beneath the earth wraps around each statue like a heavy velvet shroud, preserving their terrifying and magnificent presence. These vast corridors trap an ancient atmosphere, making every visitor feel the suffocating weight of an inescapable, dark eternity. One can easily imagine the claustrophobic dread experienced by those who originally constructed these massive chambers, knowing they would be sealed forever. The colossal army stands trapped in an endless midnight, guarding a silent kingdom that exists entirely outside the reach of the living. To construct this colossal subterranean garrison required an unprecedented mobilization of imperial resources, skilled artisans, and thousands of conscripted labourers. Millions of pounds of clay were harvested from local riverbanks, carefully refined, moulded, and fired in massive high-temperature kilns. The resulting figures were then arranged into specialised military units, including armoured infantrymen, archers kneeling in readiness, and noble commanding officers. Dozens of full-size wooden war chariots, pulled by life-size terracotta horses, were positioned strategically to lead the silent charges of battle. Every single detail of their intricate armour, leather straps, and braided hair was rendered with astounding precision and royal grandeur. This majestic demonstration of organisational power reflects the terrifying scale of a ruler who demanded total submission even from the underworld, standing at the edge of the excavated pits, looking down at the endless rows of figures. One feels utterly microscopic and insignificant. The collective presence of 8,000 silent soldiers exerts a heavy psychological pressure that words can barely capture or fully explain. It is an uncanny feeling, as if thousands of unseen spirits are lingering just behind those stoic, unblinking terracotta faces. The immense subterranean complex feels less like an ancient historical site and more like a sleeping monster waiting to be awakened. Walking above the trenches reinforces the suffocating realization of humanity's obsessive desire for eternal control and survival. The sheer density of this buried force leaves an indelible mark of dread upon anyone who gazes into its silent, endless depths. As researchers mapped the position of every warrior across the subterranean complex, they stumbled upon an alarming detail. Despite the vast expanse of the three pits, every single soldier, horse, and chariot was positioned facing one specific, deliberate direction. They were not standing guard in a defensive circle to protect the royal burial mound from all surrounding external threats. Instead, all 8,000 blind clay eyes were turned rigidly toward the east, staring directly into the dark, empty horizon. Here is where it gets interesting, because the reason for this rigid eastern alignment reveals a terrifying secret about the emperor's mind. For decades, popular history assumed this monolithic posture was a grand, posthumous victory monument, projecting perpetual imperial conquest toward the sunrise. Modern observers naturally concluded that the absolute ruler wished to forever celebrate his victorious campaigns over the distant, conquered eastern provinces. Generations of scholars initially interpreted this uniform eastern orientation as a symbolic declaration of supreme imperial dominance over all Eastern realms. Yeah. Conventional wisdom dictated that an emperor who conquered the entire known world would naturally build an eternal force to march forever forward. It seemed entirely logical that the emperor demanded an unyielding vanguard to expand his celestial territory into the uncharted spirit world. Yet when historians meticulously plotted the precise military coordinates of every subterranean trench, this triumphant theory completely fell apart. Now, listen carefully, because the arrangement of these clay ranks tells a different story than popular legend ever dared imagine. The vast legion was not deployed in an aggressive marching column designed to launch an offensive war against the unknown cosmic realm. Instead, the heavy infantry, archers, and armoured war chariots were locked into a rigid, static defensive battle formation. Deep underground, the silent vanguard stood braced against an incoming attack, ready to absorb a devastating blow from the darkened eastern horizon. This strategic military posture was not designed to conquer new horizons, but to shield the sovereign from an impending catastrophe. The supreme sovereign who had crushed all mortal rivals on Earth was now utterly paralysed by a profound, suffocating terror of retribution. But what enemy could possibly terrify a man who held total, undisputed dominion over the vast land of ancient China? To the east lay the ruined territories of the 6 rival kingdoms that the emperor had annihilated during his bloody unification. Millions of defeated soldiers and civilians had perished in unrelenting campaigns of unprecedented brutality, leaving rivers flowing thick with crimson blood. Entire ancient dynasties were wiped from existence, their sacred temples burned to ash, and their proud ancestral lineages erased forever. The dying curses of countlessly slaughtered victims hung heavily in the air, drifting westward toward the imperial palace like a poison. As the ruthless monarch aged, his iron mind became increasingly tormented by the restless and vengeful spirits of those he had butchered. Here is where the psychological tragedy turns chilling, exposing the ultimate weakness hidden beneath absolute power. Earthly weapons, iron discipline, and vast royal armies had successfully brought every living enemy to their knees in absolute submission. However, no imperial decree could command the invisible, furious ghosts that gathered in the darkness beyond the realm of physical reality. No fortress wall or royal guard could protect his fragile soul from the relentless vengeance brewing in the cold underworld. The emperor understood that upon his death, his vulnerable spirit would be cast into the underworld without any divine protection. There, in the abyss, the spectral host of the 6 annihilated nations would be waiting to tear his soul apart. The terrifying truth emerged. His greatest enemy was not a rival army on Earth, but the unyielding vengeance of the dead. Thus, the 8,000 terracotta warriors were built, not as an arrogant display of victory, but as a desperate cosmic fortress. Every clay spear, bronze sword, and armoured shield was positioned specifically to intercede between the emperor and his incoming supernatural tormentors. The grandest military creation in ancient history was born from an overwhelming claustrophobic fear of eternal cosmic retribution. In attempting to conquer death itself, the mighty sovereign constructed a permanent monument to his own paralysing paranoia. Standing forever facing east, the Clay Legion remains trapped in an eternal silent standoff against the ghosts of a bloody past. When archaeologists brought powerful lanterns into the damp subterranean trenches, a shocking microscopic detail emerged from beneath centuries of accumulated dust. Moving past the macro-scale military formations, researchers began examining the individual features of these thousands of silent terracotta warriors up close. What they discovered stunned the scientific world, challenging everything previously believed about ancient imperial mass production techniques. Instead of standardized clay molds churning out identical soldiers, each statue possessed an extraordinarily distinct facial structure and unique human expression. Fine wrinkles around the eyes, subtly arched eyebrows, varying jawlines, and meticulously rendered hair braids made every figure a living portrait. Intricate moustaches, differing ear shapes, and delicate cheekbones revealed a level of individualized realism rarely seen in ancient world monuments. Among the 8,000 figures so far, not a single face repeats another anywhere within the vast underground complex. An infantryman standing in the front ranks carries a stern, hardened jawline forged through decades of brutal frontline combat experience. Next to him, a younger archer displays soft, hesitant features, capturing a quiet vulnerability, buried beneath layers of heavy clay armor. Some officers bear deep, weathered forehead lines that reflect the heavy psychological burden of commanding men during catastrophic war campaigns. Other figures wear subtle, melancholy expressions, as if silently mourning the distant homes and families they would never see again. This staggering diversity extends beyond simple physical traits to capture complex human emotions frozen forever in cold-baked river soil. Now listen carefully, because this astounding artistic realization raises a profound historical enigma that defies conventional imperial logic. Why waste immense labor crafting thousands of unique human faces if they were destined to be buried forever in subterranean pitch darkness? In an empire driven by brutal efficiency, mass-producing identical figures from standard molds would have saved millions of grueling labor hours. The paranoid emperor only required a functional spirit army to shield his vulnerable soul from vengeful ghosts in the afterlife. He did not need individualized artistic masterpieces hidden away, where no living mortal eye would ever behold their intricate beauty. Yet thousands of artisans spent decades carefully sculpting personalized facial nuances into every single soldier before sealing them underground. To achieve such astonishing individuality on a mass scale, thousands of master craftsmen operated in specialized imperial workshops scattered across the realm. Primary clay components were cast in basic structural modules, but the final shaping of facial expressions was performed entirely by hand with delicate instruments. Modern microscopic analysis reveals individual thumbprints pressed directly into the wet clay, alongside tiny tool marks left by ancient wooden chisels and fine scrapers. Master artisans carefully added thin layers of refined paste over smooth base heads to build up realistic eyebrows, fleshy ears, and intricate facial hair. Every single warrior received individualized artistic attention before entering the high-temperature kilns, transforming raw earth into an enduring monument of ancient human craftsmanship. These painstaking sculpting techniques required immense patience and technical mastery, demonstrating an extraordinary devotion to realism beneath the surface of the earth. But the real secret is that this breathtaking complexity marks a dramatic shift in how we must view this ancient subterranean masterpiece. The narrative begins to pivot away from the megalomaniacal ruler who ordered the army toward the nameless artisans who created it. Under the tyrannical pressure of severe imperial deadlines, thousands of skilled sculptors worked tirelessly in massive underground workshops across the empire. If a single finished statue failed to meet rigorous imperial standards, the responsible craftsman faced swift execution alongside his entire family. To survive this brutal quota system, these master artisans did not merely copy generic military templates provided by imperial ministers. Instead, they looked directly at the real human beings around them, their fellow craftsmen, conscripted labourers, and garrison soldiers. By carving the authentic faces of their comrades into the wet clay, these anonymous sculptors unknowingly performed a quiet act of preservation. Each wrinkle, scar, and subtle smile became a permanent record of real people, whose names were deliberately erased from historical court chronicles. While the emperor sought to immortalize his own supreme power through a terrifying legion, artisan immortalized the common human spirit. They transformed cold clay soldiers into living memorials for an entire generation of ordinary men swallowed by an unyielding empire. The subterranean vaults became an unintended gallery of ancient humanity, preserving thousands of unique souls beneath the heavy, dark earth. Looking into those unblinking eyes, one no longer sees just an emperor's fears, but the eternal presence of the workers themselves. Thousands of miles across the ocean, inside a quiet studio in downtown Chicago, an art student named Sarah rotates a high-resolution three-dimensional digital scan. It is 3 a.m, and the pale blue monitor light illuminates her exhausted eyes as she carefully examines a single terracotta warrior. Using precise digital modelling software, she zooms past the coarse clay texture to analyse the subtle geometric contours left by ancient sculpting tools. What began as an ordinary university research project on ancient manufacturing techniques has gradually turned into an emotional journey across centuries of human experience. As her fingers move across the glass touchpad, she isolates the fine lines around the figure's eyes, measuring the exact depth of every carved wrinkle. The screen displays millions of coloured data points, rendering the ancient surface with breathtaking clarity that no human eye could see in person. Surrounded by dark city streets and humming computer towers, Sarah feels an unexpected intimacy with the anonymous craftsman who shaped this wet soil. Now listen carefully, because what Sarah discovered within that complex pixel mesh completely overturned the accepted historical narrative of imperial control. In a totalitarian regime that brutally erased personal identity to serve absolute power, these statues were never supposed to express individual human warmth. Strict royal decrees demanded total uniformity, forcing every citizen to function as a nameless component within a vast and terrifying military apparatus. Yet, as Sarah systematically compares thousands of facial scans from the digital archive, her algorithm fails to detect any repeating geometric templates. Every jawline possesses a distinct angle, every nose displays a unique contour, and every mouth wears a subtle, unrepeatable human expression. The sheer mathematical impossibility of this variation proves that the artisans actively resisted the mindless repetition of standardized factory production. She realizes that under the immense pressure of severe imperial deadlines, these sculptors chose artistically laborious paths over convenient shortcuts. Instead of relying on rigid master molds, they spent precious hours crafting unique features for soldiers who were destined for eternal darkness. Staring at the illuminated screen, Sarah realizes she is witnessing a silent and brilliant act of artistic rebellion buried deep within the earth, threatened with immediate execution for any slight flaw. Those nameless craftsmen discovered an ingenious method to defy the ruler who owned their bodies. They exploited the imperial budget and royal materials to preserve the genuine faces of their fellow workers, neighbours, and conscripted soldier friends. Instead of merely glorifying a ruthless conqueror, they quietly recorded the authentic dignity of ordinary people for future generations to discover. Each unique statue became a secret sanctuary, hiding genuine human identity inside the cold clay of a terrifying authoritarian monument. By infusing every soldier with a distinct spirit, the artists subverted the emperor's goal of presenting a mindless, unified war machine. This subtle defiance celebrated individual humanity in an era where human life was considered entirely expendable by the ruling elite. This remarkable insight exposes a breathtaking shift in how we understand the true legacy of this ancient subterranean world. The paranoid ruler who ordered this colossal burial complex believed his golden tomb and mercury rivers would grant him eternal cosmic authority. Yet his imperial dream shattered after 15 brief years, leaving behind only bitter memories of tyrannical oppression and fleeting political vanity. In profound contrast, the forgotten artisans who laboured in dark underground workshops succeeded in capturing their own immortal humanity forever. The tyrant demanded eternal life through absolute power, but it was the nameless sculptors who achieved true immortality through their art. As Sarah shuts down her computer in the early morning darkness, she knows that individual human identity ultimately outlasted the greatest empire. Beyond the silent terracotta pits lies the true centerpiece of this subterranean complex, a massive artificial mountain rising silently beneath the shifting earth mound. For over 2,000 years, this dense earthen mound has guarded the untouched burial chamber of the first emperor against all human curiosity. While archaeologists carefully cleared dust from the soldier pits, they deliberately halted their shovels at the perimeter of this central pyramid structure. A heavy sense of foreboding surrounds the sealed mound, where ancient curses and lethal engineering converge to protect an imperial monarch's final resting place. Ancient historical chronicles depict a vast underground palace designed to replicate the grandeur and cosmic authority of the supreme royal court above ground. Encased in thick layers of compacted soil and water-resistant stone, the chamber remains locked away from atmospheric decay and modern intrusive light. This subterranean fortress represents the ultimate manifestation of megalomaniacal ambition, built at the expense of hundreds of thousands of conscripted lives. The towering mound casts a long, silent shadow over the surrounding valley, hiding unimaginable secrets within its cold and unyielding depths. Now listen carefully, because what lies beneath that sealed earth is a staggering subterranean recreation of the entire known physical universe. Ancient historians recorded that master engineers crafted a magnificent ceiling studded with luminous pearls and rare gemstones to represent night sky. Beneath this shimmering celestial canopy, craftsmen forged a massive bronze map detailing the vast territorial landscape of the unified imperial realm. Poured into carved stone channels, endless streams of liquid mercury were mechanically pumped to simulate the perpetual flow of great historical rivers. This silver liquid circulated continuously through miniature ocean basins, creating a mesmerizing and toxic reflection of the artificial stars spinning above. Surrounding the royal sarcophagus, priceless treasures from conquered kingdoms were arranged alongside delicate bronze oil lamps designed to burn indefinitely. Every artistic detail was meticulously executed to ensure the monarch would reign as absolute sovereign over a timeless cosmic kingdom forever. Intricate golden carvings and elaborate jade ornaments adorned the subterranean walls, turning the dark burial hall into an eternal palace. Yet this breathtaking subterranean paradise was constructed as a lethal trap, engineered to inflict instant death upon any foolish intruder seeking plunder. Ancient records explicitly describe intricate mechanical crossbows rigged near every entrance, calibrated to fire heavy iron bolts at the slightest disturbance. Beyond these mechanical defences lies a far more insidious hazard that has grown increasingly deadly over thousands of dark subterranean years. As tons of liquid mercury slowly evaporated within the sealed stone chamber, the enclosed air filled with suffocating and highly toxic vapours. This volatile chemical atmosphere transformed the royal tomb into a lethal biohazard, capable of destroying human lungs and nervous systems within seconds. The sheer concentration of vaporized metal creates an invisible shield, far more effective than any stone wall or armed palace guard. Corrosive chemical fumes saturate every inch of the subterranean air, turning the regal sanctuary into a silent and invisible tomb of poison. What truly lies beneath that sealed mound that modern science still views with silent dread? Geophysical probes and core soil samples taken around the earthen mound reveal mercury concentrations hundreds of times higher than natural environmental levels. These alarming scientific readings confirm that the ancient historical accounts were not mere dramatic legends, but terrifyingly accurate physical reality. Modern archaeologists possess advanced scanning equipment, yet they refuse to open the main chamber due to immense environmental and preservation risks. Exposing the fragile subterranean ecosystem to sudden atmospheric oxygen would instantly destroy ancient textiles, delicate lacquerware, and priceless organic artifacts. Furthermore, rupturing the sealed structure risks releasing deadly toxic clouds into the surrounding countryside, endangering nearby residential communities and workers. The central tomb stands as an impenetrable monument where ancient chemical engineering continues to defy the technological capabilities of our modern world. Standing before the serene grassy mound today, visitors feel an overwhelming mixture of haunting fascination and deep existential terror. The silent earth conceals both unprecedented artistic magnificence and an unimaginable quantity of lethal chemical poison buried together in dark stone. In his desperate attempt to conquer mortality, the emperor created a toxic sanctuary that remains completely untouched by living hands. The subterranean mercury rivers continue their silent journey through the dark, guarding a lonely monarch trapped inside his artificial cosmos. Human ambition constructed a paradise of silver and stone, yet that very ambition rendered the sanctuary permanently cold, toxic, and isolated. The sealed pyramid remains a monument to absolute arrogance, warning future generations about the terrifying price of attempting to rule eternity. Underneath the peaceful green hill, the dark rivers keep flowing, preserving an ancient nightmare that no living mortal can ever disturb. Having conquered 6 rival kingdoms and unified a vast continent, the first emperor possessed absolute power over millions of living subjects. Yet beneath his magnificent ceremonial robes, the supreme ruler harboured a suffocating terror that no imperial military force could ever conquer. As grey hair inevitably appeared and his physical strength quietly waned, time revealed itself as an invincible and utterly relentless antagonist. The imposing palace halls that once echoed with triumphant royal decrees now felt increasingly like an inescapable, gilded prison of mortality. Every passing day brought him inexorably closer to the dark oblivion that awaits even the humblest peasant throughout his vast territory. This terrifying realization slowly eroded his formidable sanity, turning an arrogant conqueror into an intensely paranoid and deeply desperate old monarch facing his darkest fears. Now listen carefully, for this is where the Grand Monarch's obsession shattered the traditional boundaries of ordinary human reason and governance. Desperate to escape the inevitable grave, the sovereign dispatched fleets of grand ships across treacherous oceans to search for mythic, immortal lands. Hundreds of innocent young boys and girls were sent into the uncharted ocean mist, never to return from their perilous voyage. Deep within the shadowy royal chambers, court alchemists continuously boiled volatile minerals to manufacture an elusive potion of everlasting youth. These ambitious scholars mixed toxic red cinnabar with liquid mercury, promising the terrified monarch that secret chemical alchemy would grant divinity. Instead of gaining eternal life, the emperor systematically consumed lethal chemical concoctions that slowly destroyed his remaining physical health and fragile cognitive sanity. The ultimate tragic irony of his grand reign was that absolute political authority could buy everything except a single additional breath. What value did infinite imperial wealth hold when his fragile heart beat with increasing hesitation against the relentless passage of years? Fear transformed his magnificent palaces into paranoid subterranean labyrinths, connected by secret underground walkways to obscure his daily movements. He slept in different guarded chambers each night, terrified that treacherous assassins or unseen malevolent spirits might claim his fading life. The divine ruler, who once commanded invincible legions, now cowered in shadows, terrified of the silent approach of his own demise. Surrounded by fawning courtiers and bowing servants, he remained utterly alone in a dark universe governed by unyielding, eternal natural physical laws. His frantic search for everlasting life ultimately accelerated the very physical collapse he spent millions of gold coins attempting to delay. The toxic metallic pills gradually poisoned his fragile nervous system, fueling intense mental hallucinations and uncontrollable fits of violent paranoia. During a long inspection journey across his sweltering empire, the supreme ruler finally collapsed and succumbed to severe mercury poisoning. His corpse decayed rapidly in the summer heat, while corrupt imperial officials packed carts of rotting fish around his royal carriage. The supreme monarch who demanded divine status died as a foul, hidden stench travelling along a dusty and neglected provincial road. His grand imperial dynasty fractured shortly after his passing, leaving behind only the cold stone monuments to his tragic hubris. The tragic story of the first emperor serves as an enduring warning regarding the dark futility of unchecked human political ambition. Nature balances every earthly triumph with an inevitable return to dust, refusing to bow before royal crowns or imperial thrones. The sovereign built a vast subterranean clay army to guard his memory, yet his soul remained completely helpless against time. In his desperate flight from mortality, he sacrificed his own humanity and shattered the delicate stability of his unified realm. The silent earthen mound stands today not as a glorious monument of victory, but as a sombre, haunting reflection of human fear. Time ultimately conquers every earthly monarch, leaving only quiet echoes scattered beneath the vast and indifferent starry night sky. When the grand imperial funeral procession reached the foot of Mount Li, a heavy grey sky hung silently over the ancient landscape. Thousands of ceremonial flags fluttered faintly in the cold wind, while solemn drums reverberated across the vast, sombre valley of Shaanxi. Behind the hearse carrying the corpse walked endless lines of pale concubines and exhausted bronze craftsmen. These innocent men and women had not come merely to pay their final respectful homage to their master during his farewell. They were destined to become living offerings, permanently entombed alongside the deceased monarch, to serve his arrogant spirit in the afterlife. A suffocating atmosphere of dread settled over the crowd as heavily armed imperial guards quietly surrounded the massive subterranean entrance behind them. Every single step echoed like a funeral knell, signalling the imminent termination of their mortal existence beneath the cold earth. The silent valley seemed to mourn for these helpless victims, who walked toward their own living burial under harsh imperial decree. Now listen carefully, because the scale of human tragedy unfolding within those subterranean halls defies modern moral comprehension. According to ancient court records, every childless royal consort was ordered to accompany her master into the eternal darkness of his tomb. Along with these terrified young women, thousands of master engineers, stonemasons and bronze artisans were lured deep into the central chamber. These skilled workers possessed intimate knowledge of the secret mechanical traps, hidden passageways, and vast liquid mercury rivers built below. To ensure these lethal secrets would never reach the outside world, the corrupt imperial court prepared a ruthless and total betrayal. As the unsuspecting craftsmen put the finishing touches on the magnificent bronze ceiling, heavy iron gates suddenly slammed shut behind them. Panicked cries immediately echoed off the towering stone walls, as thousands realized they were forever trapped in an impenetrable underground prison. No living soul outside the inner circle suspected that the monarch's grand eternal dwelling would become a horrifying mass grave. Outside the central chamber, massive stone doors weighing several tons began their slow, agonizing descent along thick grease-lubricated granite channels. The terrifying sound of grinding stone echoed through the narrow tunnels, permanently severing the final slivers of warm golden sunlight above. A chorus of desperate screams, in frantically beating fists, and hysterical weeping erupted against the unyielding stone barriers from those trapped inside. Yet as layer after layer of compacted soil and heavy boulders were dumped into the entrance, the frantic noises gradually faded away. The suffocating earth absorbed every agonizing cry for mercy, smothering human voices beneath an overwhelming blanket of dark silence. Within minutes, the vibrant world of the living was utterly erased, replaced by an eerie, impenetrable stillness that enveloped the sanctuary. Thick shadows swallowed every desperate attempt to escape, locking those helpless souls in an eternal tomb carved out of solid mountain stone. The massive mountain mound sealed its silent lips, hiding a massive subterranean massacre behind an innocent facade of peaceful green grass. Inside the sealed burial hall, a slow and horrifying twilight descended upon the thousands of helpless souls left in total darkness. The flickering bronze oil lamps scattered throughout the palace hall began to sputter and die as available oxygen rapidly diminished. Panicked breathing accelerated the consumption of air, causing suffocating dizziness and profound psychological terror among the desperate victims trapped within. Exotic chemical vapours from the vast rivers of liquid mercury steadily evaporated into the enclosed space, filling lungs with invisible poison. How could any mortal survive inside a sealed stone vault designed specifically to preserve a corpse while destroying all living flesh? One by one, the weeping concubines and exhausted craftsmen collapsed onto the cold stone floor beside the magnificent royal bronze sarcophagus. Their final gasping breaths dissolved into the thick, toxic air, leaving only quiet corpses to guard the eternal sleep of the monarch. To complete the sinister cover-up, imperial officers ordered the execution of the soldiers who had filled the outer access trenches. Trees and local shrubs were immediately planted over the freshly turned earth to completely conceal any visual trace of human disturbance. Within a few short months, the massive earthen pyramid appeared as a natural, peaceful mountain standing silently under the vast Asian sky. The thousands of lives extinguished within those dark stone chambers were erased from official court records, buried beneath centuries of forgotten history. An oppressive and suffocating silence settled over the valley of Xianyang, preserving the royal secrets behind an impenetrable wall of toxic stone. The great imperial tomb became a tragic sanctuary where countless innocent victims sleep alongside the terrifying tyrant who claimed their lives. Above the sealed mound, the cold night wind whispers softly through ancient trees, guarding a tomb that time itself chose to forget. As the dim screen finally fades into utter darkness, Arthur sits motionlessly in his towering Manhattan penthouse suite. The vast silence of 2 a.m. settles heavily across the polished glass and steel of his private room. Beyond his wide glass windows, the shimmering lights of New York stretched outward like a sea of cold artificial stars. For hours, he had been completely spellbound by the ancient story of imperial grandeur and tragic human sacrifice. Yet as the final echoes of stone doors closing died away, a profound sense of hollow stillness remained. For decades, this powerful chief executive had poured his life into building a corporate empire that would outlast him. He had chased wealth, influence, and permanent prestige with the same ruthless obsession as that ancient Chinese sovereign. Now, surrounded by expensive modern artwork and silent luxury, he recognized the tragic reflection staring back at him. But here is where the illusion unravels, exposing the delicate lie behind every grandiose quest for human immortality. All the glass skyscrapers, corporate acquisitions, and endless fortunes were merely modern terracotta soldiers designed to comfort a frightened mind. A sudden and jarring emotional shift swept through Arthur as he contemplated the dark chamber buried beneath Mount Lee. Where he once felt awe for the sheer magnitude of the subterranean tomb, he now felt only deep pity. The formidable conqueror who unified vast territories was not a divine being or an immortal legend after all. Strip away the thousands of clay warriors, the rivers of toxic mercury, and the grand promises of eternal glory. What remained was simply a desperate, shivering old man who spent his final years frantically running from his mortality. He had sacrificed thousands of innocent lives not out of supreme strength, but out of absolute, paralyzing fear. And Arthur slowly reached out his trembling hand and clicked off the glowing television remote resting on the table. The sudden absence of sound was almost deafening, leaving him completely exposed to his own quiet, inner thoughts. He looked down at his reflection in the dark glass surface, seeing the subtle lines carved by relentless stress. How many precious years had he traded away just to build a monument of money and fragile reputation? He stared into the shadows, realizing that every board meeting and contract was just another attempt to escape forgotten obscurity. The cold realization settled heavily in his chest that no amount of worldly power could ever stop time. Now listen carefully, because the ultimate lesson of Mount Li is not found in stone, but in human vulnerability. The great emperor constructed the grandest mausoleum in human history, yet he died terrified in a distant wooden chariot. His vast terracotta army could never fight the one enemy that comes for every king and common worker alike. Sitting alone in the midnight darkness, the wealthy executive finally understood the bitter vanity of his own lifelong pursuit. The arrogant ruler was never a god standing above humanity, but merely a pathetic coward hiding behind clay masks. As Arthur leaned back into the dark shadows, the illusion of power dissolved, leaving only the quiet truth of life. In that silent apartment, a long journey of restless ambition ended not with triumph, but with quiet understanding. The magnificent dynasty that promised 10,000 generations of absolute imperial rule shattered into worthless dust merely 15 years after its founding. The grand golden palaces burned to ashes, the ruler's feared lineage was utterly eradicated, and his vast unified domain collapsed into brutal civil war. Yet deep beneath the tranquil farmland of Shaanxi, the silent clay army remained completely undisturbed by the destructive chaos raging above them. While the sovereign's political legacy disintegrated overnight, his subterranean monument kept its quiet guard within the dark, cool earth. But the real secret buried within this ancient earthen mound is not found in military dominance or imperial administrative decrees. The iron-willed conqueror demanded eternal glory, yet history stripped away his honour and trapped his memory in a toxic, sealed vault. In stark contrast, the humble artisans who were forced into cruel labour achieved the exact immortality their master failed to capture. Every delicate wrinkle carved around clay eyes, and every subtle thumbprint left on damp earth, survived the relentless passage of 2 millennia. The ruler wanted an eternal garrison to enforce his absolute authority, but he inadvertently preserved the distinct individuality of his subjects instead. Here's where it gets interesting when we reflect on what it truly means to leave a lasting footprint upon the human world. When modern observers gaze into those sculpted clay faces, we do not celebrate the ruthless tyrant who subjugated 6 rival kingdoms. We connect with the quiet dignity of ordinary craftsmen who poured their personal artistry into an otherwise soulless military machine. True legacy is never constructed through ruthless conquest, massive fortunes, or the desperate hoarding of temporary authority over helpless people. It is born from the quiet beauty of human creation, authentic self-expression, and the gentle marks we leave behind for future generations. Their delicate signatures, subtly carved into the hidden bases of weapons and clay robes, speak louder than any majestic royal inscription. These nameless individuals worked under the terrifying threat of execution, yet they managed to weave their own humanity into every sculpture. In doing so, they turned a monument of fear into a magnificent gallery of human resilience that transcends the boundaries of time. The tyrant sought to erase their identities and reduce them to mere tools, but their artistic passion outshone his grand imperial dream. As our long historical journey slowly draws toward its end, we begin to rise from those dark subterranean depths. We ascend through dense layers of compacted soil, leaving behind the suffocating stone corridors and rivers of liquid mercury. We emerge back onto the peaceful surface, where the ancient mountain mound sleeps softly under a wide, starry canopy. The frantic echoes of imperial ambition and human terror have completely dissolved into the quiet rustling of the night wind. The cool night air washes over us, gently wiping away the oppressive shadows of those sealed chambers buried beneath Mount Li. The modern world continues its restless spinning, entirely unconcerned with the ancient tragedy preserved in darkness far below the grassy ground. Proud empires predictably rise and fall like fleeting ocean waves, yet the subtle expressions sculpted by forgotten hands endure without end. Those silent clay faces offer a profound reminder that gentle human warmth will always outlast the cold arrogance of earthly rulers. The sovereign believed he was building a monument to his ultimate victory, but time transformed it into a shrine for his workers. What remains after the inevitable collapse of every great civilization is not the crown, but the enduring spirit of the human heart. The gold tarnishes and the iron rusts, yet the creative soul of ordinary people echoes softly through the vast halls of time. As we stand above the quiet moonlit earth tonight, the heavy weight of ancient ambition gently lifts away into the cool darkness. The darkness no longer feels suffocating or terrifying, but vast, peaceful, and filled with a quiet, everlasting grace that soothes the mind. As the lingering shadows of the ancient world softly fade into distant memory, the quiet stillness of your room slowly surrounds you. The heavy iron gates of imperial ambition have closed forever, leaving behind only the timeless peace of the cool night air tonight. You can now gently release the heavy weight of those long centuries, allowing your thoughts to settle into the dark, comforting silence. There are no more subterranean chambers to explore, and no more terracotta soldiers standing guard, only the tranquil rhythm of your breath. With every slow exhale, the ancient dust settles completely, leaving your mind peaceful, calm, and entirely unburdened by the passing hours. The grand empires forged from gold and bronze have long turned to dust, yet the gentle starry sky continues its quiet, eternal dance. Countless human stories have come and gone across time, yet this quiet moment belongs entirely to your own deep and restful solitude. Let the lingering echoes of lost kingdoms softly drift away, replacing every restless thought with a profound sense of safety and tranquility. Feel the remaining tension slowly melting from your body as you sink deeper into the soft warmth of your cozy, dark sanctuary. Every breath you take grows slower and noticeably lighter, pulling you effortlessly toward a dark ocean of deep and dreamless sleep tonight. The forgotten craftsmen have long laid down their heavy tools, and you too may finally surrender the pressing burdens of your day. Nothing more requires your active attention now, for the bustling world outside will continue spinning while you rest in absolute stillness. Allow the velvety darkness to wrap around you like a soft blanket, guiding your tired mind toward a peaceful and healing slumber. May your sleep remain entirely undisturbed by the restless worries of tomorrow, resting securely within the gentle harmony of the night. Rest peacefully now, knowing that true immortality is found, not in building grand monuments, but in the quiet simplicity of calm rest. Close your eyes, let go of every lingering thought, and drift gracefully into the boundless, warm embrace of a soothing dream. Thank you for travelling through history with us tonight, and I wish you a truly calm, soothing, and deeply peaceful night. Good night, gentle listener, and sleep well in the serene silence that surrounds you until the bright light of morning arrives.